In today's video, you'll learn something that can really help you. So like it and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Let's get started.
She was hanging on the edge of the ravine, with one baby clinging to her chest and another slipping down the snow. No one would have stopped. Most people would have looked away, quickened their pace, and convinced themselves that it wasn't their problem. But Ingrid was not most people, and in that moment, while the mountain wind lashed her face hard enough to make her eyes water, she had already dropped the bag on the ground and was walking toward the ravine. She was 71 years old, bad knees, an old scar on her left shoulder that hurt every time the temperature dropped below zero. And at that moment, none of that mattered. The monkey, an adult female with dark fur soaked by the melting snow, could barely keep herself standing on the icy rocks. Her front paws trembled with the effort of holding the smaller baby against her chest, while the other, a little bigger, tried to climb back to her without being able to find support on the slippery ground. The animal's eyes were half closed. It was not the look of a wild creature about to attack. It was the look of someone who had already given up asking for help. Ingrid knew that look very well. She had lived 43 years in that region of the northern mountains, in a small town called Varel, where winters arrived without warning and stayed for far too long. She had buried her husband there. She had raised her children there, watched her grandchildren be born, and she had learned, over decades lived in that cold, that the snow does not choose whom to hurt. What she did not yet know, and would only discover hours later, back in her heated home, while watching the monkey refuse for the third time the bowl of fruit she offered, was that the animal carried something different, something that was not visible at first glance, something that would completely change what Ingrid thought she knew about compassion. For now, however, there was only the biting cold, the dark and silent ravine, and an old woman kneeling in the snow, extending her trembling hands to a creature that had every reason in the world not to trust any human. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments what you thought of the story, and from which city or country you're watching right now. Ingrid managed to bring the three of them inside the house before nightfall swallowed the mountain. It was not easy. The monkey resisted until the last moment, arched her body, showed her teeth, emitted a guttural sound that echoed among the trees. But her strength had already run out long before Ingrid appeared. In the end, it was the smaller baby who decided everything. It slipped from its mother's arm, fell into the snow, and stayed still, trembling. The monkey looked at him, then looked at Ingrid, and lowered her head. Inside the house, the warmth of the wood stove felt almost cruel after so much cold. Ingrid prepared an improvised bed in the corner of the kitchen with old blankets and placed the babies together. The mother lay down between them without taking her eyes off Ingrid for a single moment. She watched every movement, every step, as if silently calculating whether that woman deserved or did not deserve the trust she had not yet given. It was on that first night that Ingrid noticed the wound. It was hidden under the fur on the right side, near the rib, a long, deep mark that already showed signs of infection. Ingrid had seen wounds like that before, on the dog she rescued when she was young, on animals she found on the trails. That had not happened by accident. Something had attacked that monkey, something with claws. The question that hung in the air of the kitchen that night was simple and disturbing. What had done that was still out there? The answer came the next morning, in a way Ingrid did not expect. Her neighbor Albrecht appeared at the door before 7 in the morning. He was in his 60s, broad-shouldered, and had the habit of talking about the animals in the region as if they were pests to be controlled. For years he had complained about the monkeys that came down to the edges of the village in winter. They ate the reserves, broke fences, scared the cattle. The previous month, he had openly said, in front of other residents, that he was going to solve the problem in whatever way he thought necessary. No one had questioned what exactly that meant. When he saw Ingrid at the door, his eyes went straight to the inside of the kitchen. They lingered a second longer than they should have on the blankets in the corner. He smiled. but the smile did not reach his eyes. "I heard you found something lost in the snow," he said slowly. "Came to see if you need help." Ingrid did not answer immediately. She let the silence last long enough to become uncomfortable, a skill she had learned from her husband, who always said that whoever speaks first in a negotiation has already lost half of it. Then she gave a polite smile, the kind that commits to nothing, and said that she was fine, that the animals had already gone on their way, and that she appreciated the concern. Albrecht stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Then he gave a brief nod and left through the snow, unhurried, without looking back. Ingrid closed the door and rested her forehead against the cold wood. He knew, not everything, but enough, and he would certainly come back. What she needed to do in the next few hours was not simple. The monkey's wound needed care that went beyond what Ingrid had at home. The infection was already showing redness around the edges. Without proper treatment, in 2 days the situation could become irreversible. Ingrid had worked as a veterinary assistant for almost a decade before getting married. She knew the signs. She knew what she was seeing. She picked up the phone and called Renata. Renata was 42 years old, a biologist, and lived 18 kilometers away at a wildlife monitoring station. They had known each other for years, since Ingrid had found a deer with a trap stuck on its leg and did not know whom to call. Renata had arrived in 40 minutes, without asking questions, with a first aid kit in her hand. Since then, her number had been the second on Ingrid's contact list, right after her children. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. Renata said she would come as soon as she could, but that access by the main road was blocked by snow. She would need a few hours by the alternate route. A few hours was too long. Ingrid hung up the phone and stood still, looking at the monkey, who watched her from the corner with the babies pressed against her. The smaller one had finally stopped trembling. He slept with his head resting on his mother's belly, breathing slowly and deeply. The other was awake, and his small dark eyes followed every movement Ingrid made with an attention that seemed almost human.
Our community grows with every comment, so don't forget to leave yours and subscribe. I love to see how far our videos reach, so tell us in the comments. What state or country are you from?
It was then that the monkey did something Ingrid did not expect. She extended her arm toward her, slowly, with a caution that seemed to cost a lot, and waited. Ingrid touched the monkey's hand, only for a second, with the tips of her fingers, with the lightness of someone who knows that a wrong movement can undo everything. The fur was rough, still damp from the snow. The monkey did not pull back. She kept looking at her with those dark, deep eyes, and Ingrid felt something she could not name at the moment. She only knew that it was real and that it mattered. There was no time to dwell on it. She went to the hallway cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and took out the green case she had kept since her days as a veterinary assistant. It still had gauze, antiseptic, a curved needle, and suture thread. It had been years since she had used any of that. Her hands trembled a little when she opened the bottle, not out of fear, but the kind of tremor that comes with the awareness that what you are about to do is serious. It took 40 minutes to clean and close the wound. The monkey did not move a single time. She lay on her side, her eyes fixed directly on Ingrid's face, breathing with that strange calm of someone who has decided to trust completely or no longer has the strength to resist. Probably both at the same time. The baby slept deeply. The silence inside the house was the kind that weighs well, like a thick blanket. It was the noise outside that broke everything. Footsteps in the snow, heavy, deliberate, coming along the side of the house where the kitchen window was. Ingrid stood up slowly and reached the curtain without turning on any light. She peeked through the corner of the fabric. Albrecht was in the yard with a flashlight and something in his right hand that she could not immediately identify. Then he turned his wrist, and the beam of light hit the metal. It was a folding cage, the kind used for capture. Ingrid felt her blood heat up in a way she had not felt for years. She picked up the phone, went straight to the call history, and dialed the number that had appeared 3 times in the last week. The environmental inspector of the region, a man named Theodore, who had left his card months earlier after an incident with illegal traps in the nearby forest. Theodore answered on the second ring. "I need you to come now," Ingrid said, with a voice that did not ask. It stated, "and bring someone with authority to issue a citation. I have everything you need here." Theodore arrived in 23 minutes with 2 agents and a camera. Albrecht was still in the yard when they appeared from the street side. He tried to explain that he was a neighbor, that he was concerned, that the cage was for another purpose. Theodore listened to everything patiently and asked him to show the license to carry the equipment. There was no license. There was also, as Theodore informed in a low and firm voice, an open record under the same name for the use of unauthorized traps, an incident that no one had been able to prove until that night. Ingrid had photographed the wound before suturing it. She kept the bandage with the blood still fresh. She wrote down in the kitchen notebook the exact time Albrecht appeared in the morning, what he said, and how he looked inside the house. She had not spent the afternoon standing still. While Albrecht was being taken to answer questions at the police station, Ingrid went back inside and sat on the kitchen floor, her back against the wall, next to the improvised bed. The monkey was awake. The babies were too. The smaller one crawled to Ingrid's knee and stayed there, its tiny hands gripping the fabric of her pants, looking at her with a seriousness disproportionate for a being so small. Ingrid laughed softly. It was a short, tired laugh, but completely genuine. Renata arrived 2 hours later, evaluated the stitches, and said that with a few days of rest and food the monkey would be ready to return to her habitat. She stayed for tea. They talked until late, while the babies explored the kitchen with that fearless curiosity that only exists in creatures that have not yet learned to distrust the world. The next morning, even before the sun rose, the monkey stood up by herself for the first time. She walked slowly to the window and stood there looking at the forest covered in snow for a long time. Then she turned her face toward Ingrid. There was no way to know what goes through an animal's mind at that moment. But Ingrid spent the rest of her life swearing that what she saw in that look was not instinct. It was recognition. It was the kind of thing that does not need words to be understood. If this story touched you in some way, tell us in the comments what you thought, and from which city or country you're watching. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It helps more than it seems.